many people do not get what they want. They look up at their lives and they're like, this is not what I want. And so if you don't have what you want, it means that the model that you view the world through is incorrect, or you have the correct model and the incorrect variables or insufficient variables. That's basically all it is.
Or the story you are telling, so you have all the variables are correct, but the way you put them together, the story, the kind of like the conclusion of the story is incorrect.
Johnny stole because he's dishonest, right? Most people would nod their heads and be like, yeah, Johnny stole because he's dishonest. But we say, what does dishonest mean? Dishonest means it's a label, right, that we ascribe to somebody who does a series of different behaviors, one of which is stealing. And so if we were to restate that sentence with a broken down definition, it would then be Johnny stole because he's the type of person who steals, which is circular and makes no sense. Because the real reason that Johnny stole is because he's been reinforced for stealing in the past, or he saw someone who got reinforced for stealing and then modeled their behavior. That is why Johnny stole.
Well, that is incomplete, because there are people who, just like Johnny, got reinforced for certain behaviors, but because of self-awareness, they realized, oh, I need to change this. So it's not as simple as someone does whatever they have learned or they have reinforced from past behaviors and results, but it's that which is true, plus they never reflected, they never decided that, you know what, I need to properly evaluate myself, what happens at the same intersection, how come I take the same decisions, and then following that route to eventually come to a realization that, oh, I need to change something, I need to stop stealing. So it's partially true, but you see, when you frame it this way, it looks like, well, Johnny has no choice. Well, he got reinforced for this type of behavior, and that's why he steals. So the statement Johnny is dishonest, I believe that it's still true when you account for the lack of responsibility or accountability that Johnny take or did not take. You see, there is a choice in there. You can be reinforced for anything, but it's still your responsibility to reflect and then realize what you're doing and change and model your behavior for better. So that's why people come up with these conclusions. If you steal, you are dishonest, because it's ultimately your responsibility. It goes beyond just behaviors that you were reinforced for.
Is that someone says, why don't you love me? And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I pay the bills, I take out the trash. Like, like, what do you want from me? And she says, like, you don't tell me I'm pretty. You don't hug me. Like, you don't listen to me you don't ever ask me how my day's going. And it's because for her, she defines love in these behaviors and he defines love in these behaviors. And so then they fight forever rather than just saying, like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Here, Alex is spot on. And that's because we were never trained to really be able to break down high-level goals down to what are the behaviors that are necessary, and then what sits and lives under that, and then how would I tackle them individually, but somehow in sequence, such that eventually the overall goal is achieved. We are fundamentally missing this skill. And because of this, most people actually focus on the outputs. I want to be successful. I want to have money. I want this. They just focus on what they can comprehend. They project, and then they aim at their projection, not realizing that in order for that projection, I want to be successful, that has to be clarified. What does it mean to be successful, and in what way that would be meaningful to you personally? And then if that's the case, then how would you break that down into sets of behaviors and then into tasks and in all of this? We just don't put in the work to deconstruct what it means to get what we say that we want to get.
And so a lot of people care a huge amount about intention. And this was one of the larger shifts that I think happened in my, I'll call it career, but just my life, was completely stripping people of their intentions and only looking at their outputs. And that made navigating relationships significantly easier for me because it allowed me to remove the noise from the signal.
Usually this happens because the people that harm you, although they mean well, they are judging their contribution based on their intention. And that means that from their perspective, it looks like, hey, I'm doing very good for you. Like, I'm a positive influence in your life. I mean well because my intentions are good. But this disconnect happens is because they never pay attention to their contribution, to their input, like the outcome. And Alex here proposes that we should never judge people based on their intentions. And that is very true because intentions are deceiving. You can always have good intentions and do harm. And this way, the person that is on the receiving side, they're going to get the harm. While the person that is on the giving side, they're going to feel like they are the best thing ever because they judge themselves by their intention. And you see this disconnect. The problem with this is that it just continues forever. Meaning, the person that does the action always thinks they're good, and the person that receives it always gets harmed. And nobody tries to switch side or wait, not both sides are not necessary to switch here because the person that is harmed doesn't need to really switch side and go like, well, yeah, but from their intention, from their perspective, they meant well. Yeah, but if you do that, you're basically setting yourself up to be in an abusive relationship. Like, you are just going to continue to tolerate the harm that you're getting just because, well, it's excused by, like good intentions. The only person here that has to switch side is the person giving providing, having the intention, because they themselves are missing out. They are not realizing, oh, I am telling myself a story, but times and times again, if I would be truthful to evaluate what is my impact in this other person's life, it's actually not good. So here, from this, let's say, two people dynamic, one is never willing to actually question themselves from the impact, from the outcome perspective. They always judge themselves from an intention perspective, and they're trapped in that. But I will tell you this, even the word trapped is not really useful, it's not accurate, because it's not like they're a victim to their own perspective. They choose. They choose to believe that. They choose to look only at their intentions because they have almost like an innate sense or like an intuition that I should not look at my outcome. I should not look at what is really my impact in this person's life because they kind of feel that it's not good. They know it. So you see, we're not really victims to our own mindset. We are active. We play an active role into choosing what we want to see. And that is where personal responsibility and, radical ownership plays a big role. Some people are willing to do that and other people are absolutely not willing to do it. And this accounts for the difference.
Probably the very beginning of this kind of thought change was with Layla. Like, I had an advisor, if you want to call it that, at the time. And I was like, I'm not sure if I want to marry this girl. I don't, help me, make this decision. And he said, well, just look at your stats. And he's like, are you in better shape? And I was like, well, yeah, she eats healthy and she goes to the gym. So I go with her. And he's like, okay. So you're exercising more, you're eating better. Okay. Are you drinking as much? I was like, no, she actually really doesn't drink. And I like drinking. I'm probably a bad influence on her. He's like, okay. So she decreases this kind of negative thing. Okay. Got it. And he's like, what about business wise? I was like, oh, I'm making more than I've ever made. And she's helping me do that. And he was like, okay. And so he just went down the list of all these different kind of components of my life that I could measure. And he's like, it seems like your life is significantly better with this person in it.
It's an interesting way to evaluate the impact of other people in our lives. It feels a bit transactional, to be honest. It feels like the decision to get married is like, okay, does this person have overall like a positive impact in my life? Which on one side it feels transactional, but on the other side it feels accurate. Because oftentimes we fail to see, or we fail to pay attention to really what matters. We might have people in our life that really have a negative impact in our life, but just because we are somehow addicted to the relationship, addicted to whatever like attracts us towards the person, might make us, it's the very thing that makes us blind to see exactly what is their impact in our life. So although it feels transactional, it's definitely a good way. Oftentimes people don't really evaluate this way. And I'm not saying like it's really the perfect way to decide whether or not should I get married, whether or not this project is the right thing for me, but it's kind of like the best thing that we have so far. Because what else can we have if not just evaluating impact? Am I getting better? Is my life getting better? Am I getting away from the things that previously I would have before this person, and now I'm staying away from those behaviors? Therefore, that would be like a positive impact. Oftentimes people make decisions based on feeling. If, let's say, all of a sudden they have like a few weeks, a few months good together, and they're riding the roller coaster of love and feelings and emotions, and they're like high in the clouds, right? They might make the decision this way, go like, oh yeah, I should marry her, or I should marry him, right? But those are exactly the people when the decision is not really objective, like Alex is describing. Eventually, a few weeks, months, years later, will get to, the payment gets due. And then eventually they will have to realize that, you know what, my life is getting worse and worse. And this has been going on for the past months and years. And eventually that becomes obvious. And yeah, of course, if you let so much time to pass, that's the point of when you have regrets. Oh, I made the mistake. I shouldn't do this. I was too much high in the clouds. I was not really thinking straight. And I think that's what it means to think straight. Think about the impact, evaluate objectively, and let aside the emotions and how you might feel in the moment, because that plays a big role on how people make decisions. And I think then that's when you're going to be in a better position to make the right decision.
You're driving down the street, and because you didn't mean to but weren't paying attention, you ran somebody over. Functionally, the difference between that person being dead because you didn't mean to because you were texting on your phone, or because you're a bad driver, and you swerving off the street to hit them, the outcome is the same.
And this is something that our society actively disagrees with, because if we look at how our laws are written, we try to tease out intention, and we change punishment and consequences based on intention.
Which, by the way, intention can be easily fabricated. This is why this is a problem, because how many times, imagine in your life, how many times you had people that their impact in your life was not good or downright bad, but when you confront them about it, they always have good explanations. And oftentimes these people will adjust their intention basically to make up for the image loss or for the damage that was made. Basically, they would say anything that you might want to hear in order for you to compensate for that. And that is really the error. The error is not looking at the impact, but switching that and compensating, looking at the intention. And that's an error of judgment.
I would look at the signal, what happens, rather than the intention, 100 times out of 100.
And that is actually a shortcut for you not to let yourself being manipulated by people. Because people will manipulate you with their intentions. They are going to say anything that you might want to hear in order to make up for the impact, for the bad impact they have in your life. But you see, this is also a shortcut for not being easily manipulated. Instead of paying attention or listening to their intention, to their declared intention, really strip all of that away and go like, let me see the impact. And even further, like even better than that, let me see the impact, not just like today, this week, but how about if you have a history, how about the last months, the last years? That's when it becomes obvious. And if you stay really focused on this, it's hard to be manipulated because manipulation happens at the level of words, stories. But when you evaluate objectively events, impact, outcome, then it's hard to be manipulated.
For as long as this person in my life benefits me,
Mm-hmm.
it's good to keep them in. And the moment that they stop benefiting me, then I get rid of them.
Mhm.
To some people, that would come across as a very transactional view of relationships.
I think it assumes a binary of benefit, not benefit. And most people have many things that they do. Like, let's say you're like, I'm married to somebody. What happens when that person stops serving me? Well, it's very unlikely that tomorrow someone goes from, I help you in these 100 ways to I either hurt you or help you in 0. People would see this as transactional. And then I would say, and? Yes, and? Why is this wrong?
Exactly. This is a big conversation about, for example, is love or are relationships transactional? Most people do not like to admit that love and relationships are transactional, especially relationships. Because we like to create a story that sounds good rather than a reality that just is. But those are exactly the people that do not have the willingness to break down events into behaviors and outcomes and, details of who did what. And that's why it's so much easier to just stay at the level of non-transaction. Because if you think about it, in every interaction, there is a transaction happening. And that is a fact, but people do not want to admit this because then they would admit that they themselves are transactional. And again, that is is the kind of like the worst way to navigate reality, because by definition, you are denying the occurrence. You are denying your intentions. You are denying your motivations. And I think that this is why some people who develop higher level of self-awareness and conscientiousness, they can see reality from this behavioral standpoint and they can understand better like the human nature. And other people just function at the projection level, at the surface level. And yeah, when two people coming from those two different camps meet together, they have no way to communicate because they are speaking fundamentally different languages.
I think some people would feel icky about applying that exchange capitalism dynamic inside of friendships and intimate relationships.
I think that exchange happens either way. They just don't want to say it.
Perfectly. Alex is spot on. It happens. It is. And he mentioned the word exchange. Exchange is the proof of relationships being transactional. Because at any time in a relationship, something is exchanged. It's almost like communication. Whether or not you talk or you don't talk, you always communicate. That is not something that you can opt out from. Same goes for relationships. Same goes from this dynamic of something is always exchanged. And when it does, then there you go. A transaction is happening. And mind you that most of the times in any interaction, there are multiple exchanges happening. There are multiple transactions happening on different levels. But for that, you have to pay attention. Every time when you communicate with a stranger and you have some sort of interest, maybe you want this person to like you because whatever else you might see down the road that you want or like, that is a transaction. You are giving something. You are offering something without acknowledging it to yourself. This is a classical example. You might see that usually in attraction context. A woman that feels that she wants to attract without even realizing passes like an attractive man, and she might do something to her hair, like, I don't know, do this to the lips or like something, right? Without realizing. And the man the same. He might puff his chest, he might stand straight, he might try to look more imposing, again, without realizing. But you notice the exchange happening in there? That's a signaling and the transaction happening in there. I'm making myself attractive to you and you are making yourself attractive to me such that we can exchange. such that we can open a channel of conversation, of communication, and then therefore we take it in the direction in which we are not really even admitting. And this is why human behavior and the human nature is such a complex thing, because it operates under the radar. We just do not want to admit what is going on. And this is why, well, for some people it's very difficult to communicate this with people that never want to admit it or even look at it.
People do change. And that's okay. And you can be friends with the person they once were and no longer friends with the person they are. And that's okay.
And here, it's like people do change. Usually we understand this as only one direction when it's actually bidirectional. When we say people do change, we assume that this is made in a positive sense, like people change from bad to good, or from, I don't know, from bad to better, right? But the change also happens in the other way. Sometimes people change from good to worse. And that is like less talked about.
The purpose of your life is what changed as a result of you being here.
What you did or who you became.
Yeah. Or the purpose of your life is all of the outside only existed to change the inside. And I think there's arguments for both. I would say I have strong affinity towards both definitions because I would say that when I go through harder times, I lean more towards like, this is happening for me. And when I'm going through easier times, it's like, I am happening to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm happening to reality.
There are multiple angles on what's the purpose of life. But just to add some quickly, I think that one of them is to achieve the impossible. To achieve the impossible means to further evolution. Like, even if this, you would say, well, how is this and why would this be the purpose of life generally for everyone? Well, it's because you are brought up in, like, you are here. For whatever reason, you are here. And if you look around, everything that you use, the camera that I use, uploading videos on YouTube, all the technology that it's available to us, was one day just an idea, maybe coming up from frustration that one person had, that something was missing, and they started to work on it. They took an active role on solving the problem. Solving the problem that back then it was impossible. You see? And then with their input, with their own struggle, the impossible became possible. So I think that that's at least one angle. We're not really here to just exist and just pass on and that's it. We are here to further evolution, to further intelligence. And whether or not artificial intelligence is really the way that we further intelligence, we will see. But at an individual level, each person, like there has to be an element of self-growth. Like you have to grow in order to contribute something better, something more valuable than that of which was invested in you for you to be here. If you think about it, what was the energy and all things being put together for you to exist, right? And you collapse those into just like one point. What was necessary for you to be here? Well, then at least one good way to look at the purpose of life would be to further that, to generate or to contribute more than it was invested in you. That's at least one way to look at it. And thinking about this, making the impossible possible or achieving the impossible, that makes it like a very good litmus test. For as long as you are not really furthering something that was here before you, then you're not really contributing that much. And that is, it's something very hard and difficult to hear for most people. But what I'm saying is not meant to be comfortable. It's meant to just bring a more honest view on why are we here. The way I see myself, for example, is that I'm an active agent of life, meaning I'm brought from and I'm made from life. And obviously, even if without anything, like without the universe making a clear statement, like, hey, you are here to do this, here is your purpose, I can almost see that, well, my purpose has to be to further that which I'm coming from, which is life. So for as long as I make the universe more intelligent, for as long as I contribute with some sort of new value, for as long as I further the very material that I'm made out from, well, then I must be at least heading in the right direction. Because, well, life is by definition working with incomplete information. Nobody really tells you. And that is why it's a perfect design. Because if anyone with like full authority, like imagine like the way we imagine God would actually come to you like however you would imagine, like a person. Be like, hey, you should do this, your purpose is this. Then you would not have your personal choice. And personal choice here, I believe, is that it's part of this perfect design of life. Because you can choose anything and nobody tells you anything. Well, when I say nobody, I don't refer people. Nobody that really holds the ultimate truth really tells you anything in specific terms. And that's not a bug, it's a feature. It's really what allows each agent of life, each person, each people to choose, to basically bet on their beliefs. And I would say that this would be the perfect test to see the difference between different agents. Right? Imagine, for example, that you yourself have like a game. And this game, inside the game, you have a few agents. What's the difference between you as the ultimate authority in that game telling them, hey, you guys should do this. You shouldn't do that. And there would be only one voice of authority, yours, nothing else. Nobody would compete with that. There are no competing voices that might say something different. Well, in that game, things would be pretty simple, but if you would do this, I guess you would just have to observe which agents did not listen to you, and this is how you would see only the bad ones, right? But you would not really see which are the good ones, because the ones that listen are not necessarily good, they just maybe just followed. But if you really want in such a game to make a perfect distinction between the good and the bad ones, the ones that are worthy and the ones that are not, you give free choice. And then you see what they do. And you never validate them like, yeah, you are doing good, you are doing bad. No, you mix signals. Some agents might do the right thing and get the wrong response. They might suffer for it. And then you let them to see, or you let them to see what they do next with that pain and suffering. Will they choose to turn against the game, or will they take a lesson from there and still guide themselves towards the betterment of the game? Understanding the purpose of life is a very complex thing. And although we never have like perfect answers, if you really pay attention to how life works, how reality works, you can almost see and read between the lines where is kind of the right direction and where is the wrong direction. Again, no clear answers, but we always choose what we want to believe.
If you love something a lot, you're willing to give up everything for it. And so when that person asks you to do something or doesn't ask you to do something and you think that they would still like it, then you are willing to inconvenience yourself to a large degree in order to do that. The reason this stuff is so valuable for me is that like it allows me to both give the things that I think the other person wants or that they've told me they want, but also how to differentiate who is using words in order to try and manipulate me. When someone like, dude, you know I love you, if it was bromance, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But then you could say, what have you given up in order to maintain this? In what way have you inconvenienced yourself in order to maintain this relationship?
Partially true, because sometimes people are willing to give away some things, but not what is required. it is true in the sense that unless you had to give something up, something that was inconvenient to you, like your survival to some degree was on the line, unless that was the case, you cannot really prove, oh, you really love me. But where it gets tricky is that, well, you're going to notice that some people will tell you that they love you, and they are willing to sacrifice some things, but not other things. And when you look closely, you're going to see that the things that they are willing to sacrifice, maybe they're not so important to them, or it's not very difficult for them. But really the things that are difficult for them, they won't be able to sacrifice it. And that's where, it's a bit tricky to realize this, because some people might say like, hey, I've done so many things for you. I've sacrificed this, I've sacrificed that. And from their perspective, it looks like they are saying like, I've shown you love. My sacrifice shows you my love. But in the same time, they might not realize that, yeah, but there are some things that I never sacrificed. And those are truly the difficult ones that I never want to or be willing to ever sacrifice. And therefore, from your perspective, it looks like, you made some sacrifices, but not others, which introduces the question, are those sacrifices just the one that they were convenient? Because some sacrifices can be convenient, and this is where it's very difficult to really see the truth or kind of like read between the lines. It's always a personal choice. What do you want to believe from their sacrifices? But I think that a good way to solve this is see what is really, really difficult for them and see if they have made those sacrifices. Otherwise, they're just choosing something that looks hard, but is not really that hard for them.
It's like, why isn't my podcast like Rogan's? It's like, okay, well, he's got 10 more years. You would know the answer to that, right? 10 more years and however many more podcasts more. And so it's, okay, well, if I were to match that and have done it back in time, would I have the same? Would I be bigger?
With the same skill, with the same...
all of that. And so it's comparing outputs without comparing inputs.
First, it's not just that. Yes, that is part of it, but there are also things that you don't know that might have contributed to other people's success that you are comparing yourself with. It's not just inputs and outcomes. It's also other elements. Sometimes it's even luck, maybe the intersection where they are, maybe the positioning, maybe just the random things in life that got them to be where you are not. And even if you would have the same level of inputs as they did, you might not really be in the same place, because life doesn't work this way. There is no guarantee that, oh, if you do this for 10 years straight like that person, you will get to the same level of success. No, that person is themselves and you are yourself, and it's not so easy to predict. It's just, you might have just more chances, but you never really know for sure, which is part of this beautiful, perfect design of life, that you have to act even when you don't know. You don't know what you will get. You only know what you will have to put in. And that is, I would say, really that shows what you are made out of. Because if things would be so clear, do this, get that, everyone would be willing to invest, to put in the effort, the stress, the resources. They would dedicate, they would commit, they would sacrifice, because they know that at the end there is something. They know with certainty, I do this, I get that. But the beauty is that you can do everything exactly the same as the other person, and you are not going to get what they did. And this is really the one of the tests of life. What are you able to commit to in the absence of absolute information?
A lot of people are like, comparison is the thief of joy. I don't agree with that. I think comparison is how you measure things. Like this is the discrepancy. Labeling the discrepancy as bad is the thief of joy.
Yep.
Comparison in general is how you can know what the discrepancy looks like between what you want and what you have, so that you can fix it. So we should compare Absolutely. You should compare yourself to Rogan. I'm just using you. But like, you know, I should compare myself to Elon. Of course I should.
The reason why it got, like, this idea got so popular that comparing yourself is bad, when comparing yourself means to make those distinctions, to really evaluate properly, what do I have here with what do I have here, like 1 kilogram, 870 grams, which at the very core, it's actually makes for good judgment. But the fact that this idea of comparison got labeled and got so popular to be bad makes me even think that this is the reason why it's actually good. Because it's almost like you are discouraging critical thinking. You are discouraging proper judgment. And one of the reasons why people say, it's a common saying, but absolutely don't agree with it, just like Alex, that comparison is the thief of joy. It almost assumes or implies that if there is a big discrepancy, like he says, oh, between me and Elon, if there is a big discrepancy, that must equate with a bad feeling. So then, therefore, it makes it for the thief of joy. Like, I'm no longer being happy about my efforts, about my results, of where I am right now, because I'm comparing myself with this otherwise super successful person that makes me, dwarfs my results, and therefore I feel less worthy. I feel less successful. I feel less happy about where I am. But that is only because you label it as that difference is bad. But just like Alex, and Alex is a highly pragmatical person. Just like him, if you really take that as in not to make yourself feel bad, but to really deconstruct, to understand, okay, but what are they doing different than I'm doing? And how could I adjust in such a way that I can, I guess, minimize that difference, that gap? Then comparison is very good. So you see, comparison is just a tool that is as good as the person using it.
A behavior that I would have changed that I don't think would have changed the outcome is like document. And you don't have to share it publicly. Just take pictures, take voice notes, email yourself, whatever catalog you want.
You know why most people actually they do not document their journey? It's because they don't really believe that eventually one day they're going to make it. So therefore those pictures and proofs will be useful. They might declare to themselves, oh, I want to do this, I want to achieve that, but deep down inside, they're not really invested into it. But someone who really is invested, they will start documenting. And I agree with this, that it's a very good idea, especially, from someone like Alex, because you might get to a point where people will not believe you no matter what. If you don't have the proof that, hey, even if you see me successful now, I did struggle. And if you don't have that to show it, no matter how well you can explain it, people will not have the image to go like before and after. This is the person that we see right now, like him, for example. People see him like a multimillionaire and that's it, but they don't see his struggle. They didn't have like a clear image of that, because if they would, then he would get a lot more credibility. And I think his advice is spot on.
You want to document it because you believe that you will be the hero that will overcome. And I think that if you can really just grasp it, like just beginning the documentation story, like even the fact that Kanye had some of those early videos, it's like he believed that he would make it and he believed he would use it.
Exactly.
And so I think one of the greatest things you can do is, and it was almost like at that point, like I believed when I took that screenshot that I was going to win, and I did believe I was going to get it back.
But you see, that's the thing. You have to believe in yourself. And that is a very good way to almost like know how much do you believe in yourself. It comes to mind this guy like Mr. Beast. He recorded the video like 10 years ago. I think his famous video like, hey, hi, me from the future, something like that. That is exactly what I'm talking about. If you are not documenting, it means that somehow, even without being explicit about it, you don't really believe that you're going to get there, that one day this will be part of the story that you tell. And if you are not doing it, you have to almost ask yourself, why am I not documenting my journey, since I am committed, since I know that one day I'm going to make it? And it's not everyone has to be or will be successful. This is an absolute truth. However, for each one person individually having their own journey, the story that they tell to themselves is, one day I'm going to make it. Well, if that is true, why aren't you documenting it? Even privately. You see how sometimes we tell things to ourselves that are not really true.
Capture shit, especially in the beginning.
The worst case scenario is you delete it. Like I'm just saying, for like, what's the downside of doing it? The downside of doing it is that you quote don't use it and that you delete it. But the upside of having it as an artifact of kind of the stepping stones of who you wanted to become, I think is invaluable.
And also the value here is building the proof of becoming. You see, if you show up every day, even and especially when nobody's watching, and you are documenting that, even if you're not publicly posting it anywhere, but just for you to have it, you cannot understand that how years later that will become an invaluable asset, because it tells the story of you becoming to whoever you are right now. And without that, although you are the person that is, you cannot really communicate this to other people in a clear way. Like you cannot really use visuals for people to instantly get the difference, the gap between who you were and who you are now. And that's like capturing every day your journey, not just that builds a proof, like a track record that is undeniable, but also it keeps you on track with whatever you are building, because, you know, life happens. Different events might actually push you away from your journey and in all sorts of directions. But if you start documenting, the documentation itself builds the guardrails or builds the, you know, the silver lines that will keep you on track.